The champagne glass in my brother Marcus's hand trembled slightly as the words hung in the air like a death sentence. His new boss, Jonathan Sterling, senior partner at Goldman & Associates, extended his hand toward me with the kind of genuine warmth reserved for equals in the business world. The group of MBA graduates around us fell into complete silence, their earlier laughter and congratulations dying as they processed what they just heard. CO. Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's. There must be some mistake here. Jonathan chuckled, maintaining his firm handshake with me. No mistake at all, Marcus. Alex here didn't just revolutionize the data analytics industry, she completely rewrote the rules. Nexus Industries went from a garage startup to a $3.2 billion valuation in just 4 years under her leadership. We've been trying to poach her top engineering talent for the past 8 months. I watched my parents, who had been absolutely beaming with pride at Marcus just moments before, now staring at me with expressions that cycled between confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been dawning horror at their years of dismissal. My mother, Catherine, clutched her pearl necklace with white knuckles, a nervous habit she'd developed when I was 12, and announced I wanted to study computer science instead of following the family tradition of law. My father, Robert, adjusted his silk tie uncomfortably, his face growing red in the way it did when his carefully constructed worldview was challenged. He'd been telling people for 6 years that his youngest daughter was going through a phase with computers. But she works at that little computer repair shop, my mother said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. In that strip mall next to the dry cleaner. Storefront Solutions, I said simply, watching their faces carefully. It's one of our subsidiaries. I like to keep an eye on ground-level operations, understand what our customers actually need. The truth was, I'd been living a carefully constructed double life for the past 6 years. While my family saw me as the disappointment who'd dropped out of their precious Harvard Law program to play with computers, I'd been building something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Nexus Industries wasn't just successful. It was quietly reshaping how Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and major hospitals handled their entire data infrastructure. Marcus's girlfriend, Victoria, who had been particularly vicious about my dead-end minimum wage job just 20 minutes earlier while we were getting drinks, was now studying me with the calculating intensity of a hawk spotting prey. She was the type of woman who could smell money and opportunity from 3 states away, and I could practically see her mental calculator working overtime. Alex, my father said slowly, his lawyer's training finally kicking in as he tried to process this information, why didn't you ever tell us about this? You never asked, I replied, keeping my voice level and professional. Every single time I tried to explain what I was working on, you'd either change the subject or make jokes about my computer hobby, and when I was going to get a real job. Jonathan was still talking to the group of graduates, completely oblivious to the family nuclear explosion happening right in front of him. The Pentagon contacted us last month wanting to license their cybersecurity protocols for the entire defense network. Apple's been in serious negotiations for 18 months to integrate our AI systems. And don't even get me started on the pharmaceutical companies lining up around the block for their clinical trial management platforms. My sister Emma, who had driven down from Boston specifically for Marcus's graduation, finally found her voice after standing there with her mouth slightly open. But your apartment, it's so small and cramped and functional, I finished for her. I don't need much space when I'm just sleeping there. Most of my time is spent at the main office or traveling between our facilities in Seattle, Austin, Frankfurt, and our new Singapore location. What I didn't tell them was that the tiny apartment they all mocked and worried about was actually a carefully chosen strategic location. It was exactly 3 blocks from Nexus headquarters, and I'd quietly bought the entire building 2 years ago through a holding company. The top floor was my actual residence, a 3,000 square foot penthouse that I'd designed myself with smart home technology that would make most tech CEOs weep with envy. The small studio apartment they'd visited twice was just convenient for those late nights when I didn't want to commute. Marcus was visibly struggling to process this information, his face cycling through emotions like a broken slot machine. His entire identity since childhood had been built around being the successful one, the golden child who went to the right schools, got the right internships, and landed the prestigious consulting job that would make the family proud. Finding out that his disappointing little sister was actually running a multi-billion-dollar company was clearly causing some serious internal recalibration. How much? He started, then stopped himself, probably remembering that asking about someone's net worth at a graduation party wasn't exactly proper etiquette. Is the company worth? Jonathan answered for him with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Last official valuation put Nexus at $3.2 billion. Alex owns 67% of the shares, plus she's got personal investments that most venture capital firms would kill for. The mathematics were simple enough that even Victoria could calculate my approximate net worth in her head. Her expression shifted from dismissive to calculating to what I could only describe as predatory interest so quickly it was almost comical to watch. My phone buzzed with a text message from my CFO, Sarah Kim. Singapore healthcare deal just closed. $240 million contract. The champagne is chilling in your office and the team is waiting to celebrate. I glanced at the message and couldn't help but smile. The Singapore deal had been 18 months in the making. A complete overhaul of their national healthcare data system that would serve 8 million people. It was the kind of transformational contract that would secure Nexus's position in the Asian market for the next decade and save countless lives through improved medical data management. I should probably head out soon, I said to the group, checking my watch. Early morning flight to Singapore tomorrow for a government presentation. Singapore? My mother asked weakly as if I'd just announced I was flying to Mars. Ministry of Health contract, I explained patiently. We're modernizing their entire healthcare infrastructure. Hospitals, clinics, emergency services, the whole system. It's the largest digital health transformation in Southeast Asian history. Marcus was still staring at me like I'd suddenly sprouted wings and started speaking Mandarin. But you never talk about travel or business trips or... You never listen when I talk, I said gently but firmly. Last Christmas I mentioned that I'd been to 14 countries that year for business. Dad told me it sounded like I was making excuses for not visiting home more often and that I should focus on building a stable life instead of gallivanting around. That had been a particularly painful conversation that still stung months later. I'd actually flown back from emergency negotiations with the London Stock Exchange specifically for Christmas Day, cutting short crucial meetings about our European expansion, only to have my father spend the entire dinner lecturing me about responsibility, commitment, and the importance of settling down with a real career. Jonathan's phone rang with what sounded like an urgent call, and he excused himself to take it privately. The sudden absence of an outside observer made the family dynamics even more awkward and tense. We stood in an uncomfortable circle on the perfectly manicured Wharton campus lawn, with the weight of years of misunderstanding, dismissal, and lost opportunities settling between us like fog. Alex, my father said finally, his lawyer voice kicking in, I think we owe you a serious apology. You don't owe me anything, I replied honestly. But maybe next time you could try asking about my actual life instead of assuming you already know what it looks like. Emma, who had always been the most reasonable and thoughtful of my siblings, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. We've been absolutely horrible to you, haven't we? For years. Not horrible, I said, though we all knew that wasn't entirely true. Just not particularly curious about who I really am. The truth was significantly more complicated than that simple statement. Their dismissal and constant criticism had actually been liberating in many unexpected ways. While they were focused on traditional markers of success, the right schools, the right jobs, the right neighborhoods, the right social connections, I'd been completely free to build something entirely revolutionary. The lack of family pressure and expectations had allowed me to take enormous risks that more supported entrepreneurs might never have had the courage to attempt. Marcus's new boss returned from his phone call, looking slightly frazzled and stressed. Alex, I'm really sorry to interrupt your family time, but that was our automotive division head. The Detroit contract situation just hit a major snag, and the client is specifically asking for you personally. Which client? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. Ford Motor Company. They want to accelerate the timeline on the supply chain optimization project by 6 months, and they're willing to double the fee if you can make it happen. I nodded thoughtfully. Ford had been one of our biggest wins last year. A complete reorganization of their global supply chain using our predictive analytics platform. The project was currently saving them roughly $400 million annually in efficiency gains and had eliminated almost 2 weeks from their production cycle. Tell them I'll conference call from the car on my way to the airport, I said. And ask Sarah to push the Singapore ministry meeting back by 4 hours so I can handle this properly. Jonathan shook his head in what appeared to be genuine amazement. I honestly don't know how you manage it all, Alex. Running a company that size and complexity at your age, it's absolutely remarkable. My age. I was 29 years old and I'd been building Nexus since I was 23 and fresh out of my computer science program. While Marcus was studying theoretical case studies and networking at business school mixers, I'd been learning by doing, hiring brilliant engineers, managing multi-million-dollar budgets, and negotiating with Fortune 500 CEOs who had 3 times my experience and 10 times my age. Experience has always been the best teacher, I said simply. My mother was still visibly processing everything, her carefully constructed understanding of her children completely shattered. But honey, why didn't you ever come to us for advice or guidance? Your father has so much business experience and I know people who... In real estate development, I said gently but pointedly. What I do is quite different from flipping commercial properties. My father's business was buying and renovating commercial properties in suburban Connecticut. He was successful at it, certainly, but it was hardly relevant to building a global technology company that dealt with artificial intelligence, data analytics, and government contracts. The few times I'd tried to explain my actual work, he'd immediately started offering advice about the fundamentals of business that had absolutely nothing to do with software development, machine learning, or international technology markets. Victoria, who had been uncharacteristically quiet for the past 10 minutes, finally spoke up with obvious calculation in her voice. So when you said you were working late all those weekends and couldn't come to family events? I actually was working late, I confirmed. Just not at the strip mall location you all pictured in your heads. The Nexus headquarters was a converted aircraft hangar in the tech district. 60,000 square feet of open workspace, private offices, specialized research labs, and a server farm that handled data for some of the world's largest organizations. We had 420 employees globally now, with new offices opening in Tokyo and Sao Paulo next quarter, and recruitment centers in 6 major universities. It wasn't the kind of environment my family could easily visualize, so they'd simply filled in the blanks with their own limited assumptions. My phone buzzed again with another message. This time it was from my executive assistant. Car is waiting at the main entrance. Driver says traffic to the airport is unusually light for a Saturday. I looked up at my family, all gathered in their graduation finery, still struggling to reconcile their long-held image of me with this completely new information. Part of me felt genuinely sorry for them. It couldn't be easy to realize you'd completely misunderstood and underestimated someone you'd known for nearly 3 decades. I really do need to leave now, I said, checking my watch again. But maybe when I get back from this Asia trip we could have dinner somewhere? Somewhere quiet where we can actually talk and listen to each other. I'd like that very much, my father said quietly, and for the first time in years he sounded sincere. Marcus finally found his voice again, though it was shaky. Alex, I'm really sorry about what I said earlier. About the family disappointment comment. That was cruel and wrong. It's okay, I said, and I genuinely meant it. You didn't know the whole story. But I should have known, he insisted, his voice cracking with emotion. I'm your brother. I should have paid attention to your life, asked real questions, been supportive instead of dismissive. The vulnerability and genuine remorse in his voice caught me completely off guard. Marcus had always been confident to the point of arrogance, absolutely secure in his position as the family's undisputed star and success story. Seeing him genuinely remorseful and emotionally shaken was unexpectedly touching and made me remember why I'd looked up to him as a kid. There's still time to fix that, I said softly. If you want to. Jonathan was gathering his things and business cards, clearly eager to continue networking with the other graduates and their wealthy families. Before he left our little circle, he turned to Marcus with a professional smile. By the way, Marcus, your first major assignment starts Monday morning. You'll be working on the comprehensive Meridian Industries analysis. They're considering a complete digital transformation of their entire operation. Should be right up your alley, especially given your family connection to the technology sector. Marcus looked confused and slightly panicked. What do you mean by family connection? Didn't I mention earlier? Meridian Industries has been using Nexus systems for almost 2 years now. Alex's team built their entire data infrastructure from the ground up. You'll probably end up working very closely with her people on the technical implementation side. I watched my brother's face cycle through several distinct emotions. Surprise, embarrassment, realization, and what might have been the very beginning of genuine respect. His prestigious new job, the one he'd been bragging about for months, would apparently involve studying and implementing the very technology his disappointing sister had created. Small world, I said with a slight smile. My driver texted that he was pulling up to the main campus entrance. I gathered my purse and the small graduation gift I'd brought for Marcus, a leather portfolio I'd picked up during a business trip to Milan last month. Congratulations on the graduation, I said sincerely, handing him the elegant gift. And congratulations on the new position. Goldman & Associates is genuinely a good firm with smart people. Thank you, he said, accepting the portfolio with what appeared to be newfound humility. And Alex, I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, and I should have been paying attention. The sincerity in his voice surprised me more than anything else that had happened that day. Growing up, Marcus and I had been intensely competitive about everything: grades, sports, parental attention, college acceptances. Somewhere along the way, that healthy sibling competition had transformed into dismissal and condescension on his part and gradual withdrawal and independence on mine. Maybe there was actually a chance to rebuild something better and more genuine. I'm proud of you too, I said, and meant it. An MBA from Wharton is no small achievement, and I know how hard you worked for it. As I walked across the beautiful campus toward the main entrance, I could hear my family behind me, their voices mixing and blending with those of dozens of other graduation families. But their tone was completely different now. Questioning, curious, perhaps even impressed for the first time in years. It was definitely a start. My phone rang as I reached the sleek black car waiting at the curb. The caller ID showed it was the Ford executive I needed to speak with immediately about the Detroit timeline situation. I answered as my driver opened the door with professional efficiency. "This is Alex," I said, sliding into the leather back seat. "I understand we have a timeline acceleration issue that needs immediate discussion." As the car pulled smoothly away from the Wharton campus, I caught a glimpse of my family in the side mirror. They were still standing in their small circle, but now they seemed to be listening intently as Marcus spoke animatedly, probably trying to explain what little he knew about my actual work. I wondered what he was telling them, what questions they were finally asking after 6 years of assumptions. The irony wasn't lost on me as we drove toward the airport. For years I desperately wanted their recognition, their understanding, their pride and approval. I'd built an empire partly to prove them wrong, to show them definitively that I wasn't the disappointment they'd labeled me. But sitting in that car heading toward another international business trip, I realized their approval mattered significantly less than I'd thought it would. The work mattered. The innovation mattered. The 420 people whose livelihoods and families depended on Nexus's continued success mattered. The millions of patients whose medical care would be improved by our Singapore healthcare system mattered. My family's belated opinion of my achievements was just one small piece of a much larger and more important picture. Still, as we drove through Philadelphia traffic toward my flight to Singapore, I found myself genuinely looking forward to that promised dinner conversation. Maybe it was finally time to let them into my real world, to show them not just the financial success but the passion, purpose and genuine meaning behind everything I'd built. My phone buzzed with another message from Sarah. "Singapore team confirms they're excited for Monday's presentation. Oh, and someone named Marcus Anderson just sent you a LinkedIn connection request." I smiled and typed back quickly, "Tell Singapore I'm looking forward to it too. And accept that LinkedIn request. He's my brother and it's time we started acting like family." Some bridges, I thought as we approached the airport, were definitely worth rebuilding.